Welcome to the Getting Dressed podcast. My name is Anthony Bolognese.
And I am Leanne Leppa.
And we are style professionals based in the DC area. Not that that matters at all to you because podcasts are everywhere. But this is really just an introductory episode letting you know what we are, who we are, what we're doing, all that kind of good stuff. Our goal with this podcast is really just to be a conversation, a fun, spirited, lighthearted, sometimes, most of the time, conversation about all things style as it pertains to men and women's fashion, casual, formal, everything that kind of comes to mind. So it's going to be very fluid. Every episode is going to kind of have its own thing. Maybe we'll bring guests in. Maybe we'll have Joe Rogan to hop in. We'll see what happens. I don't see him as a style icon though, so never mind. But Leah, introduce yourself a little bit more. Tell everyone who you are, what you do, and why people should really care about what you have to say.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anthony. I'm super excited to start this podcast. Like I said, my name's Leanne Leppa. I am a certified personal stylist, and I own and operate District Style, which is a brand dedicated to elevating women's presence through style. So with that, I go into women's wardrobes, I audit their wardrobes, and I ultimately just help them become a better version of themselves through style. So really excited to bring that perspective as well as all the things that I'm learning into this podcast today and beyond. So tell me a little bit more about why you are here and what perspective you're bringing, Anthony.
This already feels so canned. I promise we will get more casual as time goes on. This is the first time either of us have ever recorded a podcast. So we might start drinking. Just to loosen ourselves up. But anyway, I'm Anthony Bolognese. I'm the owner of Capitol Hill Clothiers, a boutique custom clothing brand, concierge service. Don't operate out of a storefront. And I just kind of go to my clients' houses, bring whiskey and cigars, do kind of the same thing that you do, audit their wardrobes and kind of figure out what they need, what they have, and what they want, and guide them in the right direction as far as modern stylings and provide custom professional attire for men and women in this area and beyond.
Yeah, So kind of getting into the reason we started this podcast, obviously I want to hear your perspective, Anthony, but for me, there are a couple different things that kind of came to mind as we were chatting through even having this conversation in the first place. Number one is style is such a part of our personal brand. It's the first representation of who we are, and first impressions are so important in today's world. Even in the Zoom world, as the remote world, some people are going back into the office. I think there's a sore lack of information and misinformation, if you will, about what style actually means for the individual. There's really a difference between fashion and style, and a lot of people just don't understand that. And so I want to demystify a lot of those pieces around style and how help people understand how they can make it much more custom and individual for themselves. But interestingly, and another reason I'm excited to chat about all these things is I've actually been speaking with a few employers, and they've had interviews with a few people, and they have come back to me and said, we're not going to hire this person because they weren't dressed appropriately for the interview, or they hadn't come prepared for this networking event. And for me, my alarm bells were kind of going off thinking, well, you would think that anyone could go online and look up something on Instagram or an influencer or literally Google professional style, but alas, the answers aren't being found. And so I hope that we can address some of those issues, but also just shed a lot of light on what style actually means and how people can come to an individual understanding of it.
Definitely. And that's also interesting. I was actually having a conversation with somebody a couple of days ago mentioning that the perspective that I have and that you have of style is very different than, I would say, the average person, because we're not just in the industry, but we also have kind of had an affinity for style in the past. And when we are thinking about new clothing purchases or what we want to wear day to day for any situation, we're actively taking into account all of the things that we know and are well versed in when it comes to what style is and what it means in the situation. And when we don't know something, we're the first ones to Google it and look at influencers and look at style trends and look at the runway even, as a lot of people do. But that, I think there is a bit of a disjointed nature to how we look at it versus how a lot of other people look at it. So I'm very curious to hear other people's opinions as well on, their style journey, whether, they're starting from absolutely no knowledge about style and then whether somebody woke them up to it, or if they just kind of happened upon it and saw that right influencer or that right celebrity wearing the right thing and started taking an interest in it. How did you first get into style in the first place? What was your journey in 20 years or less?
Yeah, 20 years or less. So my first introduction, I guess, to style was in high school. Classic. I watched What Not to Wear and fell in love with the show. I actually met Clinton Kelly in high school, which was just a trip. He was wonderful, just as sassy in real life.
So we both have each of them. I've got Lauren Conrad. I've got
We both have each of them, yes. And so basically I started experimenting with style. I definitely wore all black, lots of neutrals, and realized that that wasn't necessarily something that I was excited about, but I didn't know what my style actually was. Continued to experiment in college, went to the other end of the spectrum, started incorporating a ton more colors into my style. And then I started actually helping family and friends throughout this journey, just going through their wardrobe, complimenting them on their looks, or saying, hey, maybe...
diplomatically saying you're messing this up real bad right now.
Maybe that isn't the best thing to be wearing for your body type, but realized that I had always told myself that I wasn't creative, but that style actually became a creative outlet for me. And I realized that I was actually naturally gifted in that arena. And so the more that I gave myself credit, the more that I leaned into learning about it and actually helping people on a paid one-off basis. And so when I finally got out to DC back in 2016, I was actually working more as a consultant than anything else. I hadn't started District Style at that point, but both helping men and women in the professional space as well as personally within my network on helping them understand what personal style is and how to actually achieve it through their own custom wardrobe, but as well as an understanding of their vision of their personal brand and where they're going in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And so that's really how I evolved. I got certified in personal styling, and then, of course, I started District Style. And so I wanted to elevate my education so that I could ultimately tell people the reason why I thought the way that I did, and it wasn't just some theory that I was pulling out of nowhere. There's actual science behind it. So that's really how I got to where I am today. What about you?
That's also, really quick aside, that's also, that last point is an interesting thing, like the science behind it. I think that that's something that, I mean, even in my world, like, I'll say this in a minute, but my experience with style has been very trial and error.
Totally.
There's been I think a lot of people's has, but as far as putting a formula together or any kind of scientific method applying to someone's wardrobe or their personal style, I think that's an interesting take that I'd love to expound more on. Maybe next episode, teaser, we'll see.
Definitely. Yeah, I think we should.
But no, as far as my journey, I was also a member of the Black Clothing Only Club in high school, as well as
Who isn't back in high school?
Yeah, black hair, it was a whole thing. Everyone had a scene phase.
Hey, I had blonde hair in high school.
All right,
I
yeah,
know.
we all had our times.
I know.
But yeah, well, after I graduated high school, I started doing freelance work, and I've been a creative my whole life, so I've been doing just various freelance gigs, and I took this gig for a couple of years doing video editing for gentleman'sgazette.com. If you're listening to a style podcast, I highly recommend looking up Gentleman's Gazette because he's still, Sven Raphael Schneider, the owner, is still putting out fantastic content very consistently, and just through osmosis and watching and editing these videos for 40 plus hours a week, I learned more than I ever would have imagined learning about menswear specifically, all while wearing hoodies and sweatpants in my bedroom editing these videos. So by the time, like you said, by the time I moved to DC, I noticed that there's a lot more people in professional attire, and I kind of had a reason, I think I was 20, maybe, right about 20 when I moved up here. And I just kind of saw this opportunity to build out my own wardrobe and start learning more about it. And the people that I started interacting with in this area were just like you said, the influencers and the bloggers and stuff in that world that were not necessarily pioneering style trends, but were definitely on the pulse. And getting to know them, becoming friends with them, and kind of working with them in various capacities allowed me to kind of branch into that realm. And starting Capitol Hill Clothers was a symptom of that. I met with my co-owner at the time, and we just kind of theorized about our experience with clothing and our affinity for our own personal style, and decided to start Capitol Hill Clothers to kind of serve that market in a more, not passive way, but I guess a little bit less of a business-centric way. It is a business, all things considered, but it's definitely more a way for me to connect with people and teach style and just have fun. with it versus, making a quota, because I'm not going to fire myself if I don't sell a suit every month,
Right. And fun side note, that's how we met too,
Yes.
through Capitol Hill Clothiers.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea who you were at the time and didn't know we'd be starting a podcast years later. But that was a fun accidental encounter.
Lots of wine.
Lots of wine, always lots of wine. I think you brought up a good point, though. As you moved to DC, you started realizing that DC actually isn't the mecca of style and fashion, which hopefully, us and many others are pioneers in that space and trying to bring that creative outlet into the personal lives of everyone around us, because I just think there really hasn't been any light shown on that before.
Mm-hmm. And as a quick disclaimer, we will not be making this a hyper-regional podcast. I don't want us to talk about DC a whole lot, but it inevitably will come up because that's where we're recording this. That's where we've both lived for several years now. So we will be drawing off of that. And I'm actually also asking the listeners, kind of curious to hear your perception of style in different areas.
Totally.
Because I know when I moved to this area, I really had no idea what DC was. I knew that it was the capital. I grew up in Florida. The education system wasn't quite that bad, almost. But I really had no idea that, all the government contracting stuff that was going on here and consulting and even stuff on the Hill. Like, I never really considered this to be a style mecca. Most people, rightfully so, think of LA and New York when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to be serving a market that is decidedly not known in the style world at all. But that's interesting. And I'm very curious to hear from people just where they're from and what the style is like there. Because I know that I don't think I've ever brought a suit back to Florida from DC, because I would never imagine myself wearing a suit in Florida.
Totally.
Just because maybe it's the life that I had there or the people that I'm seeing there, but there's really no reason to.
Exactly. And I think that's a good point, is neither of us are from DC. And so I think we bring interesting perspectives. I'm from the Midwest in Michigan. You're from Florida. Obviously, we've traveled around all over the country. So I'm hoping that our listeners do share some of their ideas of what style actually looks like around the country. But also, we're not blind to some of that either. So I think we will have I hope that we bring a unique perspective from our own backgrounds as well.
Yeah. Not to make this too inside baseball. Again, this is the first episode. You'll have to roll with the punches here, guys. But back to the idea of a personal brand and personal style. How do you define someone's personal style? Any individual?
Well, let me start with personal brand, because I think that's actually an important element. So our personal brand in a nutshell is our perceived image and reputation. So what I mean by that is everyone else around you has an understanding of who you are. And then you yourself have an understanding of who you are. And having a strong personal brand means those two things are married and that they are almost identical to each other. So if I were to ask you, hey, Anthony, what are my top strengths and what are my top weaknesses? You could, spit out something, and I would ask myself, is that my understanding of myself too? And so, of course, as we look at a personal brand, we think about our values, our vision, the things that we like and don't like, our goals. And so that's all part of it. How we communicate with people is a really important part of personal brand. So, of course, as I think about personal brand holistically, or almost as the whole pie, I look at personal style as a piece of that pie, a large piece, I will say. Granted, I'm biased.
I was going to say, we're both biased in that.
We're both biased, but that's why we're here. And when it comes to personal style, it means that your style is a collection of your clothes that is a reflection of your tastes, your preferences, your lifestyle, and where you're going. It does evolve, and it should continue to evolve. And I think sometimes people get caught up with this idea that once they have their style, it's solidified for the rest of their lives. And that's not true. We're dynamic, changing human beings. Like, we move around, we get married, we have kids, we change careers, we become CEOs. Our style should be an absolute reflection of who we are in the present time. And so honestly, I think that's the beauty of personal style, is because you can communicate a message to the world without ever having to talk to someone. And there's power in that.
Definitely. I would also add that in a more optimistic toward the future way for any individual, your personal style can also get you to where you want to be. And not to sound like, I'm trying to make a sales pitch for anything here, because it definitely sounds multi-level marketing way. But like, dressing for the job you want is something that I think everyone has heard that phrase throughout their life. But it's really a thing. I mean, dressing for where you want to be, who you want to be around, whether it's, streetwear and trying to, kind of make friends just out in the world, or professional wear, getting a job or finding new networking opportunities and stuff like that. Your personal style is definitely a great way to get your foot in that door, even in a way, like you said, before you ever actually open your mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny side note, I just finished the show Inventing Anna. And while I don't recommend anyone take this course of action, it was really important to the character Anna, and of course in real life, for her to dress well, because she was dressing for the people that she was around. And of course in the show, and again in real life, she always looked at people, and if they weren't dressed to her standards, she's like, you look poor. And again, I don't want to set that standard on anyone, like rich or poor, whatever, socioeconomic sphere you fall into, but it really shed a lot of light on that situation for me. Is people respect you more depending on how you're dressed, and I think
Definitely.
that totally is true in the workplace as well. You earn people's trust, quite frankly, when you're dressed better, and they want to pay you more, they want to give you more projects, and they want to promote you because they see that you care about yourself, so you sure as heck are going to care about what they care about too.
Definitely. And I actually have a funny anecdote about that. So when I moved up here, I didn't know that the county that I moved to, Loudoun County in Virginia, is the wealthiest county in the country. Somehow did not know that when I first got a place to live there. And very quickly realized that I needed to up my game when it came to just my professional image, and really kind of sidestep some of the normal processes to get to where I wanted to be so that I could afford to continue living there. And in that time, I was still young, and this I think especially applies to younger people who are trying to gain some level of, I guess, advanced, not status, that's a little bit too much, but more than what you have.
Right.
I had a wedding ring and a pair of glasses.
Here comes a good story, guys. I'm just kidding. I don't know what you're about to say.
Well, there was no wedding. But no, I mean, every time I would, meet with somebody that I thought might be a prospective client, or somebody who, would be able to get me further in my professional or personal life, I would put on that wedding ring and wear those glasses, and it would just elevate me to the point where it made me look a little bit more respectable, a little bit older, and just someone that I guess they can take a little bit more seriously. And it worked, because I've had a baby face for quite a while.
Same.
And it didn't work. Trying to ask for, high ticket things for suit stuff, or for any of my other businesses that I was in the process of starting at that time, trying to get that foothold. It definitely took a little bit of, let's say, deception to get there, and dressing in a way that, I'm wearing a tailored suit. I'm wearing a wedding ring, even if I'm not married. I'm wearing glasses because it just kind of exudes that element of, I guess, more than you are.
Right. Almost seriousness in a way.
Yeah.
You take yourself seriously.
Exactly. And it's not necessarily costumey. I wasn't wearing the glasses that, what's his name from Ocean's 11?
Brad Pitt?
No. Well, yeah, him too. His were always sunglasses though.
That's true.
Ruben.
Oh,
big,
yeah.
Coke bottle glasses. They were tasteful, appropriate for my face, all that kind of stuff. But it really worked out, and I haven't since then had to really, let's say, lie about myself via my wardrobe or styling choices. But it's definitely, in an anecdotal way, an interesting way to get to where you want to be.
Right. Yeah, and I think you illustrate a great point. Is everyone goes through transitions and different seasons of their life, which I know I just mentioned. But you're coming into a new area, you didn't know who lived in that area and what type of population was there. You didn't know what you were going to do for work necessarily. So you were in transition phase. You were also, going from this very creative, wearing a hoodie, editing different types of content to, wow, I'm putting myself out there now. I'm very forward facing in my job. What does that actually look like as it reflects my style and who I am? But I think largely speaking, kids getting out of college, what does your college attire look like going into your working world, or those transitioning from their mid-20s into early 30s? You're getting those director, VP level roles. You're actually trying to be taken way more seriously, again, at least in the professional world. And of course, mid-40s, 50s, 60s, it could continue to go on. We all face transition, and I think there's a really important element of self-awareness to be considering as we think about personal style and what that actually means for us as we go through those transitions. Like taking myself, for example, I'm trying to audit my own closet just as much as I am for my clients, and just realizing that I've really tried to dial into understanding my personality type as it relates to style, which we'll go into in other episodes. But I'm classic creative. And so a lot of my clothes just aren't a reflection of who I am anymore. I've also had color analysis done, which we can talk about later on as well. And a lot of my clothes just don't serve my color palette as well. And so acknowledging that I'm in a season of transition in my closet and being okay with, hey, I have way less pieces right now, but I'm building more in, and it's going to become way more intentional, and I'm going to feel way more confident because of it.
Definitely. And I think that's also, and capsule wardrobe is a whole different episode, but being able to kind of audit your own wardrobe is definitely a necessary step. And before you necessarily, I don't know, compare yourself to an influencer or a celebrity in their wardrobe, being able to look at yourself and kind of spend the time. This is the perfect time of year for that. I'm doing the exact same thing. As we, inch closer and closer to spring, committing to being spring. I'm getting all of my sweaters and stuff off the rack at home. Yep. And evaluating, like, okay, I didn't wear this once this year. Like, am I over turtlenecks? Have I had my time in those? And then the same thing with the stuff that's now making it onto my garment racks. All right, I remember not wearing this that much last year. Am I thinking about wearing it this year? Do I fit into it? Thanks, COVID.
Hashtag COVID-20 is a real thing.
Yeah, just kind of like having the wherewithal to not just use that same roster of pieces that you've been using for the past several years, and taking the initiative to kind of look at style trends, or even just ask people that that are stylish, like that are always kind of wearing something interesting and new. That's honestly a lot of how I have made friends in this past 6.5 years of being here, is just kind of walking up to people on the street and being like, hey, like those shoes are really unique. Like, where'd you get them from? And that is a great way to start a conversation and just make a new friend in fashion. And as much as, like you said, we are biased toward fashion in our relationships, I think to the average person, it's still an important thing to be able to relate to people in that way, and let yourself be influenced not just by social media, but by the people around you, and the people that actually are wearing things that make you notice. Because if you notice it, you like it.
Right. I think the thing for me is, like, use the tools at your disposal to help you understand your personal style. Outside of course, hiring a stylist, like Instagram's going to be really helpful. Understanding what you like on people that you already know. Pinterest is really, really great. Looking up literally things as specific as like street casual for office, right? And then honestly, Google Shopping is for some reason not super popular yet, but I think it should be, because it really helps you narrow your search. Like, you could literally be looking up like hot pink pleated midi skirt, and a plethora of options will come up. And so there are free tools at all of our disposal that are really, really helpful when it comes to elevating our personal style and understanding it.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that, there is an element, like I mentioned earlier, to being willing to do that research yourself and knowing the piece that you're looking for. But having those relationships that, with people that are as honest as you, with your friends and family, and being willing to say like, hey, probably not that for you, but maybe this, in whatever diplomatic way you choose to do so. I think it's an important thing to be able to do that relationship wise. And I think that there's also a benefit to being willing to kind of do that deep dive sort of research yourself. And everyone kind of has their own journey. For even in my instance, like I was at the airport coming back from Boston a couple weeks ago, and I saw a guy walking through the terminal wearing just dark jeans and a white denim jacket. So I went on Poshmark and bought a white denim jacket.
I love that
moment. Because I was like,
that is amazing.
I noticed that. That's something that I like. That's something that I don't have. I have other denim jackets, but not white.
Right.
And, inching towards spring, lighter outerwear seemed like the perfect thing to buy. And we're going to keep alluding to future episodes because we have so many things that we desperately want to talk about. But resale, like fashion resale, is such an important way for someone to kind of be able to build out their initial wardrobe.
Yes.
You don't have to buy high-end pieces for everything that you do. You can test out a nice looking piece used, as long as you're not a crazy germaphobe,
Yeah, I mean, I'm really trying to lean into that, honestly, because I am not here for the prairie / Y2K style. Like, I lived that, and I just don't want to go back. And so that is so in. And I committed this summer. I'm like, I want to be more feminine. I want to wear more dresses. And then it's like Laura Ingalls just plastered all over every single store I shop at. So that's just not going to work anymore.
Better that than Lily Pulitzer.
That is true. That is true. Okay, I completely agree. But kind of back to your point about resale, like there can be some amazing resale shops online and in person that I think are totally worth perusing as we cultivate our personal style. But Anthony, as we wrap up our episode today, I would love to hear like what is one piece of a piece of advice that you would recommend for someone just starting out understanding their personal style.
Keep your eyes open. I'm going to go back to that same point I just made, but keep your eyes open, see what other people are wearing, see what you like, and see what makes you kind of question their style abilities. And honestly, in the world of conflict that we all live in, there's an element of healthy conflict in your own brain, like being able to form those decisions and kind of have your own opinions on style and being like, all right, those shoes I would never wear in a million years, but those ones I'm very interested in. And even if it's just a kind of a mental note that you're taking with every person that you interact with, take note of their style and take note of what you like and see if you can kind of build out your wardrobe based on what you like to start with.
Totally. I completely agree with that. I would also add is evaluate what you currently have and get rid of some pieces. My basic rubric for understanding what we should get rid of is if it doesn't fit, remove it from your closet. If it looks outdated, remove it from your closet. If it's worn out, remove it from your closet. And if you just don't like it anymore, remove it from your closet. And I like to think about this in seasons. Not everyone lives in seasons, but we do. And I always have, actually. And so if I didn't wear, a sweater for the entire winter and I just don't like it anymore, it's time to remove it from my closet. And so I think that's actually a really good place to start as well, so that you're not overwhelmed with clutter, understanding where your baseline is at.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I hope that was a fulfilling first episode. Like I said, we will definitely clean things up and be a little bit more comfortable as time goes on. But we're excited to have you along for the journey. We'd love to have you follow us on social media, primarily Instagram. We will never do a TikTok. I say that now. You're welcome to clip me and quote me later. But right. It is Getting Dressed Podcast on everything. So Facebook, Instagram, and maybe one day TikTok. We'll see about it. Probably not. But thank you for listening, and we're looking forward to seeing the episode 2.
Can't wait to see you guys soon.